Kansik, good evening. I'm TR Wheatley. Welcome to APTN National News. Today at the Province House in Halifax, Nova Scotia, the Mi'kmaq and supporters gathered to protest the province's lifting of a ban on uranium exploring and mining, including the lack of Mi'kmaq consultation and consent. APTN's Angel Moore has the story.
He just signed away our rights, but it's not that easy.
That is Cheryl Maloney from the Saskatchewan First Nation. She is talking about Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston opening the door to uranium exploration when the radioactive ore was added to the province's critical mineral list this past March. A ban on uranium exploration and mining had been in place since 2009. Maloney's hands are covered in mud from the Bay of Fundy to symbolize the cultural connection to the water.
Free, prior, informed consent. Everybody has to have a say, not on what they can take from the land. We have to have a say on how we protect that land and protect the water.
About 80 people gathered outside the Province House in Jabuktuk, also called Halifax. They're calling for a stop to critical mineral exploration and demanding Mi'kmaq consultation and consent, including Melanie Peter-Paul. She is from the Saskatchewan First Nation.
We are here today because the Mi'kmaq Nation was not consulted when the uranium mining ban was lifted. There was no free and prior informed consent, and we are here to say no to uranium mining in Nova Scotia.
Tamara Young is chief of the Pictou Landing First Nation. Last month, she spoke on behalf of the Nova Scotia Chiefs at the province's Standing Committee on Natural Resources and Economic Development.
Frankly, that engagement should have come much earlier in the process than where we are now. As constitutional rights holders across the lands, waters, and resources in Nova Scotia, we expect to be part of early discussions before decisions are made. We should not hear about important developments that Nova Scotia is making from the evening news.
Maloney says it is time to govern with Mi'kmaq laws. She is urging Mi'kmaq and Nova Scotians to come together.
They're coming for all of our critical minerals and all of our water. And those two things together are really important. And the lack of communication consultation by Tim Houston's government is why we are going to start a shadow government.
Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabuktuk, also known as Halifax.
The fallout continues after the Doug Ford government rammed through its controversial Bill 5 in the Ontario legislature on Wednesday. On Friday, the head of the Chiefs of Ontario, which represents 133 First Nations across the province, weighed in on the bill. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
Abram Benedict says the Progressive Conservatives made the wrong decision this week by using their majority to force through the passage of Bill 5.
Very disappointed that this week we've seen the government of Ontario proceed with accepting the bill through its processes, even though they've heard, quite strongly from our chiefs across the region that we reject Bill 5 in its current context, including the amendments that have been proposed.
The bill has raised the ire of First Nations because they say it was passed without proper consultation. It aims to create special economic zones in areas such as Northern Ontario's Ring of Fire. This would speed up development while bypassing environmental regulations at the same time. Benedict says First Nations are open to meeting with the Premier and Minister of Indigenous Affairs, Greg Rickford.
The Premier did commit to meeting with leadership. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to secure that meeting as of yet. With respect to Minister Rickford, he has said that he would meet with leadership as well. But their message also has been that, this was, of course, prior to the bill passing, has been that, after the bill, then we'll go consult. And that's not how it works.
But one thing that is non-negotiable is Bill 5 in its current form has to go.
And now that the bill has been passed, it still continues to be the same. That the government needs to repeal the legislation so that they can reset how the process has been, and that they are having meaningful conversations, dialogue with the rights holders, so that we can find a pathway forward together.
The Neskantaga and Anishinaabe nations have also sent out statements condemning the legislation. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Also, new federal legislation aimed at removing barriers for major projects could be put in place before Parliament rises for the summer. The proposed One Canadian Economy bill would also open up interprovincial trade barriers so that goods and services can move without restrictions across provincial borders. Prime Minister Mark Carney told reporters this afternoon that a new federal major projects office will be created to get projects started within 2 years. He said Indigenous peoples will be included in the process through consultation and inclusion, aligning with Section 35 of the Constitution and the duty to consult.
Indigenous expertise will be at the center of this new process, including through an Indigenous Advisory Council comprising First Nations, Métis, and Inuit representation to provide guidance to the new federal major projects office. We will also be providing funding for Indigenous participation in this new process of evaluation from start to finish.
Joining us now to talk about that federal legislation is Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak. Thanks for joining us. National Chief, you met with the Prime Minister yesterday to discuss the proposed fast-track legislation. How did that go?
Well, we've just received a copy of this proposed bill, and our legal team will review the draft, and we will provide a full response over the coming days. Over the coming days, we will also organize a meeting of the AFN Executive and invite chiefs to attend a national online forum to review the bill. We appreciate Prime Minister Carney reaching out yesterday to explain his government's plan to define and fast-track strategic national infrastructure projects through legislation. I had said to the Prime Minister that First Nations support efforts to protect Canada from economic uncertainty and advance resource revenue sharing agreements. However, First Nations are very concerned that this proposal may violate collective rights. These have only increased given the approaches taken to these bills in Ontario, in British Columbia, and of course the Alberta Premier's public statements about separation from Canada. That is why it is so important that Parliament and the Senate take the time needed to ensure that First Nations and rights holders have an opportunity to properly review, speak, and propose improvements to this legislation before it is passed. We fear that attempts to ram legislation through Parliament may have significant consequences. The rights of First Nations under international law, the United Nations Declaration Act, and the Constitution of Canada are at stake. And failure to obtain free, prior, and informed consent will likely result in protracted litigation. During my discussions with the Prime Minister yesterday, we were also pleased to restate that the significant nation-building opportunities associated with finally closing Canada's long-standing and shameful First Nations infrastructure gap. This gap has perpetuated deep-rooted inequality in our country, in Canada, and led to poorer health outcomes, limited education opportunities, and less prosperity for First Nations compared with other Canadians. So we will continue inviting the Prime Minister to take this opportunity to use this legislation to finally fast-track modern schools for First Nations kids, clean water, quality housing, access to high-speed internet, all-season roads, and vital community infrastructure for First Nations. Closing the First Nations infrastructure gap will strengthen Canada's autonomy, resilience, and security, and it will provide significant economic and social benefits to Canada.
Thank you for your time today, National Chief.
Thank you.
Around 18,000 evacuees are registered with the Red Cross in Manitoba for support and shelter from wildfires near their homes. As of Thursday afternoon, 26 communities and First Nations have evacuated, with 4 others on short notice evacuation orders. Government officials say more than 1,700 hotel rooms in the province have been assigned to evacuees, with 200 rooms still available and 200 more to become available in the coming days. Some people displaced from their homes by wildfires have been sent to Ontario, where 1,500 hotel rooms have been made available by the provincial government. Almost 800 of those have already been assigned. Manitoba says about 360 evacuees were still in temporary shelters on Thursday morning.
Thousands of Manitobans have been displaced from their homes and communities, and as a government, we have moved very quickly to give them safety and shelter. Working across multiple government departments, working with community partners, with Canada, we've accomplished a huge scale evacuation in a fairly short time. Because of the huge scale of this crisis, we did open congregate shelters to provide immediate safety. However, as policy, Manitoba aims to provide hotel rooms for all evacuees. Now the majority of evacuees are in hotel rooms or with friends and family.
Now to British Columbia, where a fire that broke out last week is threatening a First Nation community in that province. APTN's Tina House has the story.
The Saskatchewan River fire started last Wednesday, May the 28th, from a lightning strike, and due to high winds and dry conditions, has now exploded to cover over 7,000 hectares, threatening the Kelly Lake Cree First Nation, which is near the BC-Alberta border.
So we are seeing this fire moving at a rapid rate towards the Alberta border, most aggressively north of Kelly Lake and south of the community of Kelly Lake. However, the fire has been spotting into the community of Kelly Lake. So quite rapid, extreme fire behavior, aggressive fire behavior, and significant growth towards the Alberta border.
Shelley Kellio from the Kelly Lake Cree Nation says the fire grew so quickly.
We noticed smoke coming from the southwest. So we had Philip Campbell and his wife go out to drive to close to an area we call Kiskutna, which means cut bank in Cree. And they went down the Dead Cat Road, and this is where they had shot some video of that wildfire and the walls of flames that were happening. It was reported.
The evacuation alert was issued last Thursday, and over 70 people were given just 2 hours to pack and leave immediately. They are now in a hotel in Dawson Creek. However, a few members of the community stayed behind to help. Firefighting crews are currently on the ground fighting the flames, as well as air support. This video shows them scooping up water from Kelly Lake to douse on the fire in the hopes of saving homes and other structures.
We're really concerned, and of course, nobody wants to lose their personal property, and it's really worrisome right now. So
the latest information provided by BC Wildfires says the fire is just now 1 kilometer away from the community, and they have now issued a full evacuation order for everyone to leave. Strong winds are forecast for the next 4 days, making the situation more volatile.
Given the extreme fire behavior, there are currently no achievable control objectives on that east flank. It is much too dangerous, risky, and volatile to have people at the head of this fire. Aircraft are working on bucketing in the Kelly Lake area to try to slow it down, or kind of redirect it into certain areas if possible. But given the extreme nature of this fire behavior, certainly there's no chance of stopping it where it's at.
all we could do is ask the public to pray for our community, and that's all we could do.
The Saskatchewan River wildfire is just one of 70 active fires across BC. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Time for a quick break. When we return, we take you north to the Yukon. Jeskwa Bitaman. A Mi'kmaq group has received funding from Environment Canada and Climate Change to purchase and protect some coastal lands along the Bay of Fundy. The Signigduk is a Mi'kmaq-led climate action project. It received over $900,000 over 3 years to protect the New Brunswick coastline of the Upper Bay of Fundy and to purchase 100 hectares of land that will be donated to a Mi'kmaq land trust by 2030. The project is partnered with the Elsipogtog Mi'kmaq Nation to restore and protect salt marshes, which store carbon and protect the coast. The founder of Signigduk is Lyle Vicaire. He hopes this project will help promote Indigenous conservation.
Indigenous-led conservation, Mi'kmaq, Edewaptumuk, Tuwaisian, a lot of these concepts are coming out into light. A lot of indigenous people are being trained in sciences and using indigenous knowledge, what we were taught, and with stuff we're being taught in the sciences, and doing these initiatives is part of that whole grand scheme, as how I see it.
The 2025 Provincial Auditor Report version 1 was released this week. Although the report covers many areas for improvement, healthcare and education stand out as key areas where Saskatchewan residents could see better results. Video journalist Rachel May spoke with the provincial auditor.
We looked at where they could do things better going forward.
Provincial Auditor Tara Clement says that people struggling with addictions are waiting too long to be seen.
What we did find is overall the Saskatchewan Health Authority isn't doing enough to almost analyze what is the extent of wait times the clients are having to encounter before they are being able to see a prescriber in the outpatient scenario.
She says the audit found average wait times are just over 4 days, exceeding the 3-day recommendation. The audit also found problems with addiction treatment centers not preparing clients for returning to their communities, with many having to come back for more treatment. It was much the same story in education.
And we found that the Ministry of Education had made some improvements for sure.
Provincial educators have implemented the ministry's Inspiring Success framework to integrate Indigenous knowledge, culture, and languages into curriculum from preschool to grade 12. But a previous audit found that in 2023, 48% of Indigenous students graduated within 3 years of starting grade 10, compared to 88% of non-Indigenous students. Reading levels show a similar gap. Only 28% of Indigenous grade 3 students read at grade 3 level or above, versus 57% of non-Indigenous students. Clement says the ministry hasn't set a goal for improvement in this area, and that needs to happen to measure progress.
But what we found that they haven't done is they haven't set targets overall in terms of allowing them to measure what is that almost baseline that you're striving for, and are we being successful in terms of undertaking initiatives?
Clement says she's glad to see public sectors working to implement recommendations to help ensure the best outcomes for Saskatchewan citizens. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
First Nations in the Yukon announced Wednesday that they'll be combining a group of regional leadership roles. Beginning in October, the Council of Yukon First Nations Grand Chief will take over the responsibilities currently held by the Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief, representing all 14 Yukon First Nations at the national level. In a joint statement, the organizations say the goal of the merge is to streamline governance, reduce duplication, and strengthen national and political advocacy grounded in shared priorities of all 14 Yukon First Nations. Currently, the Yukon is represented at the AFN by Regional Chief Kluani Adamic, who has been in the role since 2018. The Council of Yukon First Nations is set to elect a new Grand Chief on June 25th. Time for one last break. We hear from our colleagues at Nouvelles Nationale and Investigates. Be right back. Pitigwe, welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Holidays in Honolulu. Great shot shared by Colleen Chalafu from their recent vacation to Hawaii. Thanks for sharing. If you have a picture you want featured on TV, email it to share@aptn.ca. Now, let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, Charlottetown 18, Halifax 20. Kuujjuaq 8, Nain 11. Chibougamau 19, Quebec City 23. Sault Ste. Marie 23, Peterborough 25. Big Trout Lake 24, Kapuskasing 24. Churchill 18, God's Lake 23. Barons River 23, Dauphin 18. North Battleford 16, Regina 19. Uranium City 17, Buffalo Narrows 15. Fort Chipewyan 13, Peace River 22. Edmonton 20, Lethbridge 22. Bella Coola 28, Campbell River 26. Smithers 24, Prince Rupert 15. Old Crow 17, Beaver Creek 17. Wrigley 20, Trout Lake 23. Tuktoyaktuk 12, Colville Lake 16. Cambridge Bay 1, Whale Cove 7. Arctic Bay 2, Igloolik 4. Every tattoo has a story. For some, it can be a constant reminder of a traumatic past influenced by gangs and violence. This week, on an all-new episode of APTN Investigates, video journalist Tamara Pimentel meets up with 3 women as they work on erasing painful chapters of their past. With more on the story, Tamara joins us now in studio. Tamara, can you tell us about the women in your story and how they're erasing their past?
So I interviewed 3 Indigenous women in Winnipeg. All 3 of them have tattoos that resemble a past that they aren't particularly proud of, whether that's gang involvement, whether they're a victim of violence and intergenerational trauma. And as part of their healing journey, they're having those tattoos removed through a nonprofit here in the city. In my episode, as they go through the tattoo removal process, it takes quite a few appointments to get those tattoos removed. They share their stories that come with the tattoos.
Can you tell us about the tattoo removal project that's offered here in Winnipeg?
So the project is called Mother Inc. It was created by Della Stanky, and it's funded by the city and the province. And the way it started is Della used to work in halfway houses in Winnipeg, and a lot of people told her they were afraid to leave the house because of their tattoos. They felt it was a target, and they were afraid that maybe they would be jumped by their old gang or rival gangs. So she now offers free tattoo removals to anyone leaving that lifestyle. And she even brings her services into jails so men and women can get rid of their ink before their release date. And it's the only service like it in North America.
Tamara, what stood out to you while speaking with the women?
So what stood out to me was the hard work that they went through to get to this point in their lives with very little support. Each woman said that when she was being released from provincial jail in Manitoba, there were not a lot of supports there. All 3 told me that when they were released, they wouldn't have connections to outside supports. And they actually said they would get dropped off at a bus stop just on the outskirts of this city. When they were released, they were just given a bus ticket, some change, and left at that bus stop, making it really easy to fall back into the same scene, get in with the same people, and ultimately end up back in jail again. So turning their lives around definitely was not an easy thing for them to do.
Looking forward to that. Thanks, Tamara.
Thank you.
You can catch APTN Investigates Skin Deep tomorrow night on APTN. Well, it's Friday, so that means it's time for another edition of Nouvelles Nationales with Kim Sullivan. What do you have coming up, Kim?
Hey TR, we hope you tune in tonight at 6:30 Eastern. Tensions continue in regards to Bill 97 in Quebec and its potential effect on forestry, so we will definitely be talking about that. There's also changes to the 2025 moose hunting regulations here and a story that will make you think twice before you insult someone on Facebook. Finally, in honor of Indigenous History and Heritage Month, we share 4 Indigenous books to discover. See you tonight.
And that's all the time we have for today, Friday, June 6th. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. Kristen and Dennis are back in the host seat next week. From all of us at APTN, Agase, Kitom, Kawapamitana.